Yeah, that is an additional angle, and I think I'm with you there, Jeff. I think there's so much more that needs to be agreed and discussed, but for many of the European leaders here, having that agreement after midnight last night was a massive success. Many of them are calling it that, not just Orban. We've also had tweets from the likes of Macron, from von der Leyen, from Scholz as well, saying we got a deal, basically, to cut out 90% of Russian oil imports by the end of 2022, because when you factor in that Poland and Romania aren't going to continue using the pipeline by then, that is where we will get up to with that level. But in terms of those technicalities, yes, reinsurance is one of them, or insurance rather, of that seaborne cargo. The other interesting one to consider, part of the deal making here, was whether Hungary would be able to continue refining and reselling on the Russian oil that it receives through the Druzhba friendship pipeline that comes into the country, and they still seem to be working out some of the finer points on that. Now speaking of Hungary, you know, that was really the centre of all of this. They are so reliant on Russian oil, to the extent that even Western leaders like Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte were saying, I sort of understand the position they're in. But of course it raises the wider question of why haven't the EU countries put more effort into moving away from this dependence not only on hydrocarbons but Russian hydrocarbons as well. That will be a key focus of today's talks. They'll be talking about Repower EU, this idea, this project to move away from Russian gas by the end of 2030. And speaking of gas, I do want to bring in another element to this story as well, because we're talking purely about oil here, but on the gas side, Denmark and the Netherlands today set to be cut off from Russian gas. Now, they're not hugely dependent on it, but it is hugely symbolic. They join the likes of Finland and Bulgaria as well, because what they've done here is taken a stand and said we're not paying for Russian gas in rubles. And there have been reports just in the last hour that Denmark has indeed been cut off. We'll have to keep an eye on from the Netherlands. But back to the oil point of view, Orban, understandably, the Prime Minister of Hungary, calling this a huge success, saying, tweeting in the final hours or putting on Facebook, we did it. Hungary still has its oil. Let's take a listen to what he said.
The Hungarian position is very simple, because energy is a serious issue. It's not a kid game, yeah. So it's serious. So it means that first we need solutions and then the sanctions. Up to now, the first 5 sanctions package was approached in a different way. First we made the sanctions, and then we started to think about the consequences and looking for solutions. But because it's energy, it's risky, it's serious. So therefore we have to change our approach. First solutions, then sanctions. And up to now, we haven't got the solutions.
I do believe you can see the man himself on your screens at the moment, Viktor Orban, currently arriving at the European Council Special Summit meetings. We've got helicopters flying overhead here. We're just next to that building. And the energy story will continue to loom large today. And one of the points that's been missing from the releases we had overnight, in my mind, is what is happening if there's going to be any EU support for the countries, that they're going to see massive price spikes. So Jeff mentioned their Austrian energy company OMV really trading down in the markets. And it does make me wonder how much support, if there is going to be any, will be supplied by the European Union to those Europeans who are going to be suffering much higher energy prices, much the likes of which we've seen in the United Kingdom already. Now, another focus today, of course, will also be Ukraine itself. The macro financial support of 9 billion euros or so agreed so far, how they're going to help fund the reconstruction of Ukraine, and also food security. It's going to be a major issue. We heard yesterday from an African Union spokesperson talking about the impact that spiking commodities prices in the soft commodities sector, wheat exports, grain exports in particular, are having on African countries, emerging market countries as well. So the leaders will be heavily focused on that, and defence. That's the other key thing being discussed. They basically ran an analysis on so-called defence gaps in EU defence policy. Mr. Borrell telling me yesterday that they have problems with duplication. They've got capacity gaps in defence. We need to spend more and spend better, because ultimately there is a war going on.
Here's some more from Mr. Borrell, because he's just stepped in front of the microphones.
90% less. Only some exceptions for the landlocked countries. I think it's a reasonable way out of the discussion. You know, this weekend we have been engaging in long and difficult diplomatic discussions with the ministers and the ambassadors, and finally the leaders arranged the last pending issue. So the 6th package has been approved. Not only think on the oil ban, think also on 3 more important banks out of SWIFT. It will still put more difficulties to the Russian economy in the exchanges with the outer world. So this is another step further another show of unity. It takes a long time in Europe to discuss and to agree because we require unanimity. But I think that the effort of these last days has been worldwide. And today we will discuss about defense, how to improve the defense capacities of the European Union member states. So remember that defense is a competence of the member states. And the member states created the European Defense Agency, which I have the honor of chair. And the purpose is to try to look at how do we perform and sort